Marcus Thorne stood at his office window on the 32nd floor of Boston's financial district, watching the October rain trace patterns down the glass. At 53, he had built everything he'd ever wanted: a thriving investment firm, a beautiful home in Brookline's most prestigious neighborhood, and what he had always believed was a perfect marriage to Catherine, his wife of 25 years. The text message that changed everything still burned in his mind: "We need to talk about your wife. Things you should know." It came from an unknown number 3 days ago, and despite his best efforts to dismiss it as a prank, the seed of doubt had taken root. Marcus ran his hand through his salt and pepper hair, remembering the subtle changes in Catherine's behavior over the past few months. The late-night, charity board meetings, the new yoga classes, the suddenly password-protected phone. Each detail, insignificant on its own, now formed a disturbing pattern he couldn't ignore. "Mr. Thorne." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Davidson is here for your 2 o'clock. Send him in, Claire." Marcus straightened his tie, pushing his personal concerns aside. James Davidson was more than just his oldest client, he had become a close friend over the past decade, someone Marcus trusted implicitly. James entered with his usual confident stride, but today there was something different in his expression. "Marcus, we need to talk." The gravity in his voice made Marcus's stomach tighten. "Not about investments." They settled into the leather chairs by the window, and James leaned forward, his normally jovial face etched with concern. "I've been struggling with whether to tell you this, but as your friend, I can't keep quiet anymore. I saw Catherine last week at the Four Seasons." Marcus felt his throat constrict. "She mentioned having lunch there with her sister." James shook his head slowly. "It was dinner. Around 8. And she wasn't with her sister." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She was with Robert Callahan." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Robert Callahan, the young, ambitious real estate developer who had joined Catherine's charity board 6 months ago. Marcus had met him twice at fundraising events, watching how he commanded attention with his casual charm and movie star looks. They seemed intimate, James continued reluctantly. The kind of intimacy that goes beyond a business dinner. Marcus's mind raced back to Catherine's recent behavior, the new dresses, the increased attention to her appearance, the subtle cologne scent he'd noticed on her clothes, a scent he didn't wear. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. "There's more," James added, pulling out his phone. "My wife Sarah serves on the same board. She mentioned that Catherine and Robert have been working very closely on a new project. They've been meeting regularly, usually late afternoons at his office in Back Bay." Marcus felt the familiar weight of his wedding ring, twisting it unconsciously. "Maybe it's innocent," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe," James agreed, but his expression suggested otherwise. "But there's something else you should know about Callahan. He has a history of pursuing wealthy, married women." Sarah heard rumors from the charity circuit. "Apparently, this isn't his first. Close collaboration." As James shared more details, Marcus's mind drifted to his teenage daughter, Emma, away at boarding school. How would this affect her? The thought of her world being shattered by scandal made his chest tighten. Later that evening, as Marcus drove home through the rain-slicked streets, he made a decision. He wouldn't confront Catherine immediately. No, he needed more information, needed to understand the full scope of what he was dealing with. He had built his career on careful analysis and strategic thinking, he would approach this crisis the same way. Pulling into their circular driveway, Marcus noticed Catherine's car was missing. Another board meeting, no doubt. He checked his watch, 7:30 p.m. Opening his phone, he pulled up the tracking app they'd installed years ago to share locations. Catherine's dot blinked steadily, not at the charity's offices, but at an upscale apartment building in Back Bay. Robert Callahan's building. Marcus sat in his car, rain drumming on the roof, and opened his laptop. It was time to do what he did best, gather information, analyze patterns, and formulate a strategy. But as he began his research into Robert Callahan's background, he had no idea that he was about to uncover something far more sinister than a simple affair, a discovery that would shake the foundations of everything he believed about trust, loyalty, and the price of revenge. The rain continued to fall as Marcus typed, each revelation adding another layer to a conspiracy that would soon consume his entire world. And somewhere in Back Bay, in a luxurious apartment with a view of the Charles River, his wife was making decisions that would set in motion a chain of events from which there would be no return. The next morning, Marcus woke to the sound of Catherine getting ready for her usual Saturday tennis match. He watched through half-closed eyes as she moved around their bedroom with practiced grace, her movements carrying no hint of guilt or inner turmoil. 25 years of marriage, and he had never seen her so dedicated to maintaining her appearance. The private training sessions, the subtle cosmetic treatments, the designer tennis outfits that seemed to appear in her closet with increasing frequency. "I might be late for dinner," Catherine called over her shoulder, adjusting her diamond tennis bracelet, his anniversary gift from 2 years ago. "We're discussing the winter fundraiser after the game." Marcus noted how she avoided his eyes, a habit he'd only recently begun to notice. "The fundraiser with Robert Callahan?" he asked, keeping his voice carefully neutral. Catherine's hands faltered for just a moment. "Among others. The whole board will be there." She grabbed her keys and phone, then hesitated at the door. "Marcus, is everything okay? You've seemed distant lately." The concern in her voice almost made him doubt himself. "Almost. Just work stress," he replied, mastering the tremor in his voice. "Have a good game." As soon as he heard her car pull away, Marcus opened his laptop. His late-night research had revealed disturbing patterns in Robert Callahan's past. 3 failed marriages, all to wealthy women. A string of harassment complaints that mysteriously disappeared. And most intriguingly, connections to several high-profile divorce cases where husbands had lost everything in surprisingly one-sided settlements. Marcus's phone buzzed, a text from Claire, his assistant. She'd been working overtime, discreetly gathering information about Callahan's business dealings. "Found something. Need to meet in person. Urgent." An hour later, Marcus sat in a quiet corner of a small cafe in Cambridge, far from their usual haunts. Claire looked nervous, constantly checking her phone. "What you asked me to look into?" she began, sliding a folder across the table. "It's worse than we thought. Callahan's charity work. It's a front. The whole organization is designed to target wealthy couples, specifically ones where the husband controls significant assets." Marcus opened the folder, his coffee growing cold beside him. Financial records, evidence of shell companies, and a pattern of suspicious transfers painted a devastating picture. "They identify potential targets through the charity circuit," Claire continued. "Catherine isn't just having an affair, she's been working with them for months." The realization hit Marcus like ice water in his veins. Every late-night meeting, every sudden business trip, every new password on her devices, it had all been part of a calculated plan. His wife of 25 years wasn't just betraying their marriage, she was actively working to destroy him. "There's more," Claire said, her voice dropping lower. "I found emails, they're planning something big. Something that goes beyond just taking your money." She hesitated. "Marcus, I think they're trying to frame you for financial fraud. They've been creating a paper trail, manipulating records." Marcus thought of Emma, away at school, unaware that her world was about to implode. His daughter, who had always idolized her mother, would soon learn that everything she believed about their family was built on lies. "Sir," Claire touched his arm gently, "there's something else you need to know about Robert Callahan. He's not who he claims to be. His real name is Robert Kane. He changed it 10 years ago after his involvement in a case where a wealthy businessman was found dead under suspicious circumstances. The death was ruled a suicide, but..." Marcus's phone lit up with a text from Catherine. Tennis ran long. Meeting the board for lunch to finalize plans. Don't wait up. Attached was a photo of her with her tennis friends, all smiles and expensive athleisure wear. But in the background, partially obscured, he could make out a familiar figure, Robert Callahan, watching from the clubhouse. As Marcus stared at the photo, another text came through, this time from the same unknown number that had first warned him. Time's running out. They're moving faster than you think. Check the safe in your office. Tonight. Claire looked at him with concern. What are you going to do? Marcus squared his shoulders, years of business negotiations having taught him the value of appearing calm even when your world was crumbling. First, I'm going to protect my daughter. Then. He paused, a cold determination settling over him. I'm going to find out exactly how deep this conspiracy goes. What he didn't know was that across town, in a private room at the Boston Harbor Hotel, Catherine was already setting the final phase of their plan in motion. And in less than 24 hours, Marcus would discover that the betrayal he had uncovered was merely the tip of an iceberg that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone involved, in ways none of them could have predicted. The office building was eerily quiet and Marcus returned that evening. His footsteps echoed through the empty corridors as security cameras tracked his movement. Each one, he now realized, could be feeding information to Catherine's conspirators. The thought made his skin crawl. His office safe had been a constant in his life for 15 years, a place for crucial documents and the occasional emergency cash. But as he approached it now, heart pounding, it felt like opening Pandora's box. The mysterious texter had been right about everything so far. His hands trembled slightly as he entered the combination. Inside, everything looked untouched at first glance, the corporate documents, the bearer bonds, the family passports they kept for emergencies. Then he noticed it, a slight discoloration on the back wall. Pushing aside the papers, Marcus found a small USB drive taped to the metal surface. Dad? The voice nearly made him drop the drive. Emma stood in his office doorway, her boarding school uniform replaced by casual clothes, her face drawn with worry. His 17-year-old daughter had inherited Catherine's grace but, thankfully, his analytical mind. Emma? What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at Exeter. Marcus quickly pocketed the drive. I tried calling you all day. Her voice cracked. Mom showed up at school this morning. She tried to withdraw me, said we were going on an emergency family trip. But something felt wrong, Dad. The way she was acting. I've never seen her like that. Marcus felt his blood run cold. What exactly did she say? She said you were having some legal troubles, that we needed to leave the country for a while. But when I asked to talk to you, she got strange. Angry. I pretended to go pack my things and called Claire instead. She sent a car for me. Marcus crossed the room and pulled his daughter into a tight embrace, his mind racing. They were accelerating their timeline. Whatever was on this drive, whatever they had planned, it was happening now. Listen to me carefully, he whispered, still holding her. Your mother, she's involved in something dangerous. Something illegal. I need you to trust me right now. Can you do that? Emma pulled back, her eyes showing a maturity beyond her years. I already figured that out. I found something in her email last month when she asked me to help with her phone. She pulled out her own phone, showing him screenshots. She left her Gmail logged in. There were messages about offshore accounts, something called Operation Clean Slate, and Dad, they were talking about making you disappear. A security guard's voice crackled through the office intercom. Mr. Thorne. Mrs. Thorne is here to see you. She says it's urgent. Marcus's mind raced through scenarios, each worse than the last. Catherine showing up now could only mean one thing, she knew Emma had fled to him. The pieces suddenly clicked into place, the drive in the safe, Emma's attempted withdrawal from school, Catherine's sudden appearance. This wasn't just about money anymore. Fire escape, he whispered to Emma. Claire's waiting in the parking garage. Go. Dad, no. I'm not leaving you. Emma, listen to me. He gripped her shoulders, his voice urgent but gentle. Everything I've built, everything I've done, was to give you a better life. Right now, that means getting you to safety. I'll be right behind you, but I need to know what's on this drive. The elevator chime echoed through the floor. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, showing that same quiet strength that had always made him proud. As she slipped out the fire escape, Marcus plugged the drive into his computer. What he saw made his blood freeze. Financial records, offshore accounts, and elaborate plans, not just to frame him for fraud, but to stage his suicide after the discovery of massive embezzlement. The final email was dated today, target location confirmed. Team in position. Execute at midnight. The office door opened. Catherine stood there, immaculate in a designer suit, her face a mask of concern that didn't reach her eyes. Behind her, Robert Callahan emerged from the shadows, along with two men Marcus had never seen before. Marcus, darling, Catherine's voice was honey-sweet, we need to talk about Emma. She's been acting irrationally, making wild accusations. The doctors say it's stress from school. We have a facility ready for her, the best psychiatric care in Switzerland. Marcus felt a calm settle over him, the dangerous calm of a man with nothing left to lose. He had dreaded this confrontation, but now, seeing them here, seeing the true face of the woman he had loved for 25 years, he felt only clarity. What Catherine didn't know was that the mysterious texts hadn't just warned him, they had connected him to others. Other victims of Callahan's schemes, other lives destroyed. And together, they had built something Catherine and her conspirators never expected, a counterplan that was already in motion. As Marcus reached for his phone, a series of messages began lighting up screens across Boston. And in that moment, as Catherine's confident smile began to falter, he realized that the game they were playing was far from over, it was merely entering its final, devastating phase. The silence in Marcus's office stretched like a wire about to snap. Catherine's perfectly composed facade showed the first hints of strain as her phone buzzed repeatedly. Across the city, her carefully constructed world was beginning to unravel. Whatever you think you're doing, Marcus, Catherine's voice carried an edge of desperation beneath its cultured surface, think about Emma. Think about her future. She needs help. The way Sandra Chen's daughter needed help. Marcus's quiet words hit like a thunderbolt. Catherine's face drained of color. Or Michael Preston's son. All those troubled teens who mysteriously needed treatment in Switzerland, right after their parents discovered your operation. Robert Callahan stepped forward, his handsome features hardening. You're in over your head, Marcus. You have no idea. Actually, I do. Marcus turned his computer screen, showing a live stream of federal agents entering the Boston Harbor Hotel. Your board meeting today. Every word was recorded. Every account number, every plan, every confession about what really happened to David Chen after he discovered your scheme. The name hung in the air like smoke. David Chen, the suicide that had haunted Marcus's research. Sandra Chen's husband, whose death had left her vulnerable to Catherine and Robert's manipulation. It's not just the hotel, Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. Right now, every victim of your charity work is coming forward. Every offshore account is being frozen. Every document is being unsealed. He looked directly at his wife. Did you really think Sandra Chen was the only one who kept evidence? Catherine's mask cracked completely. You don't understand. I had no choice. Do you know what it's like, living in your shadow? Being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, while you controlled everything? Her voice rose hysterically. Robert showed me how to be strong, how to take control. By destroying other families? By planning to send our daughter to some hidden facility because she discovered the truth? Marcus's voice broke slightly. The Catherine I married would never. The Catherine you married was a fantasy, she spat. A convenient prop in your perfect life. Well, I created something of my own. Something bigger than your precious reputation. One of the men behind Catherine reached inside his jacket. Marcus's hand moved to the silent alarm under his desk, but before he could press it, the office lights went out. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows as multiple voices echoed from the hallway. FBI. Nobody move. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Robert lunged forward, but years of martial arts training, a hobby Catherine had always mocked, served Marcus well. He sidestepped, using Robert's momentum to send him crashing into the desk. Catherine turned to run but found her path blocked by federal agents. As handcuffs clicked into place, Marcus saw something break in Catherine's eyes. Not remorse for her actions, but rage at being caught. You'll never prove anything, she hissed. We were careful. Every document, every witness. Except one, Emma's voice came from the doorway. She stood with Claire and a federal agent, holding up her phone. I didn't just find emails, Mom. I found your videos. The ones where you and Robert planned everything. The ones where you laughed about Dad's suicide. Her voice caught. The ones where you called me a liability. Catherine's face contorted. You ungrateful little, an agent led her away before she could finish. In the aftermath, as federal agents secured the scene and collected evidence, Marcus held his daughter as she finally let her tears fall. The magnitude of their narrow escape, the depth of Catherine's betrayal, and the long road ahead hit them both at once. I recorded everything, Emma whispered. From the moment she showed up at school. The way she talked about you, about me, it was like she was a different person. Or maybe this was who she always was, and we just couldn't see it. Marcus stroked her hair, remembering all the times Catherine had subtly undermined their relationship, always with a smile and a reasonable explanation. Sometimes the people closest to us were the most convincing masks, he said softly. But they can't hide forever. Claire approached them tentatively. The agents need your statements, but it can wait until morning. You both need rest. She hesitated. Marcus, there's something else. Sandra Chen is here. She wants to talk about David. About what really happened that night. As dawn broke over Boston, Marcus sat in a quiet conference room with Sandra Chen, whose quiet strength reminded him so much of Emma. Together, they began to unravel the full story of Catherine and Robert's operation, a tale of manipulation, betrayal, and murder that spanned years. But even as they exposed the darkness, Marcus found himself focusing on the light, his daughter's courage, Claire's loyalty, and the unexpected alliance of survivors who had refused to remain victims. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in months, it was illuminated by truth rather than shadows. The morning after Catherine's arrest, Marcus sat in his home study, surrounded by the echoes of a life that no longer existed. Family photos lined the walls, moments frozen in time, each one now tainted by the knowledge of Catherine's deception. Emma slept upstairs, finally peaceful after hours of tears and quiet conversation. Sandra Chen sat across from him, her hands cradled around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. In the soft morning light, he could see the shadows of grief that still haunted her eyes, even 3 years after David's death. I blamed myself for so long, Sandra said softly, breaking the silence. The night David died, he had tried to tell me something was wrong. He'd discovered irregularities in the charity's accounts, but Catherine, she was so good at making people doubt themselves. Marcus nodded, remembering Catherine's subtle art of manipulation. She could make you question your own reality. David was going to expose them that night, Sandra continued, her voice steadying with each word. He had proof, Proof that Catherine and Robert were using the charity to identify vulnerable families, to create situations where they could step in as saviors, while systematically draining accounts and destroying lives. Emma appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her grandmother's old quilt. Without a word, she came to sit beside her father, leaning into his embrace. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for his daughter's quiet strength. The security footage they claimed was corrupted that night. Sandra pulled out a flash drive. David backed it up. I've been afraid to come forward, afraid for my daughter. But when I heard about Emma, her voice caught. No more children should suffer for their crimes. The footage played on Marcus's laptop, its grainy quality doing nothing to diminish its impact. David Chen confronting Robert Callahan in the parking garage. Catherine appearing from the shadows. The struggle that ended with David's fall, a fall that was anything but accidental. Emma's grip on Marcus's hand tightened, but her voice remained steady. That's why Mom was so desperate to get me to Switzerland. She knew I had evidence, but she didn't know what exactly I'd found. You were so brave, Marcus whispered to his daughter. Both of you were, he added, looking at Sandra. Keeping these secrets, carrying this burden alone. Not alone, Claire's voice came from the study entrance. She carried a stack of files and a determined expression. The FBI has been building a case for months. My brother, he was one of their early victims. Different names back then, same pattern. I've been working undercover, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. The revelation stunned Marcus. Claire, his trusted assistant of 5 years, had been fighting her own silent battle all along. Why didn't you tell me sooner? We needed Catherine to believe she was in control, Claire explained. The moment she felt threatened, she would have run, taking all her victims' assets with her. We had to let her think she was winning. As morning turned to afternoon, more survivors began arriving at the house. Marcus had opened his home as a safe space for victims and their families to share their stories, to begin the healing process together. Each account revealed new layers of Catherine and Robert's manipulation, but also highlighted the incredible resilience of those who had survived. Emma moved among them, offering quiet comfort and listening with a maturity that brought tears to Marcus's eyes. She had transformed her own pain into empathy, her trauma into strength. Dad, she said later, as they stood in the kitchen preparing coffee for their guests, I keep thinking about what Mom said, about being a prop in your perfect life. Were we all just pretending? Marcus set down the coffee pot, turning to face his daughter fully. The love between you and me, that was never pretense. Your mother's choices were her own. She wasn't a victim of circumstance, she was an architect of cruelty. I used to think love meant never questioning, Emma reflected. But maybe real love is being brave enough to see the truth, even when it hurts. A gentle knock interrupted them. Sandra stood in the doorway with her daughter Amy, the same age as Emma. We found more, she said quietly. Hidden accounts, properties we never knew about. Catherine didn't just take our money, she took pieces of our lives, our trust, our ability to feel safe. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the house, the survivors gathered in Marcus's living room began to form something unexpected, a foundation of support and understanding. They shared not just their stories of betrayal, but their hopes for healing, their strategies for rebuilding trust, their dreams for a future free from manipulation's shadow. The healing would take time, Marcus knew. The scars of betrayal don't fade overnight. But as he watched Emma and Amy sharing quiet conversation in the corner, as he saw strength returning to Sandra's eyes, as he witnessed Claire's quiet pride in finally bringing truth to light, he understood that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means growing stronger in the broken places, building something new from the ashes of what was lost. 6 months after Catherine's arrest, Marcus stood in Emma's doorway at Exeter, watching her arrange photos on her dorm room wall. Among them was a new one, Emma surrounded by the children of other survivors, all of them smiling at a retreat they'd organized for families healing from similar betrayals. The Healing Hearts Foundation, they called it, born from the ashes of Catherine's fake charity. You know, Emma said, adjusting a frame, I used to think strength meant never showing pain. Mom taught me that. She turned to face her father, wisdom beyond her years in her eyes. But real strength is what I saw in that courtroom last week, all those families standing together, telling their stories, refusing to be silenced. Marcus remembered the trial vividly. Catherine's perfect mask had crumbled completely as victim after victim testified. Sandra Chen's evidence had been devastating, but it was Amy Chen's testimony about losing her father that finally revealed the full human cost of Catherine's schemes. Your testimony made a difference, Marcus said softly, remembering how Emma had stood tall despite Catherine's attempts to intimidate her from the defendant's table. The judge said it was crucial in understanding the pattern of emotional manipulation. Emma hugged herself, a gesture that reminded Marcus she was still so young, despite her maturity. I didn't do it for revenge, she said. I did it because somewhere out there, another family might be going through what we did. They need to know they're not alone. The sentencing had been handed down yesterday, 30 years for Catherine, life for Robert Callahan for David Chen's murder. But the true victory wasn't in the punishment, it was in the healing that had begun among the survivors. Dad? Emma's voice was thoughtful. Remember when Mom used to say that trust was for fools? I think I finally understand what she meant. She never trusted anyone because she never loved anyone more than her own desires. Marcus crossed the room and sat on Emma's bed, patting the space beside him. When she joined him, he took her hand. Your mother saw love as a transaction, something to be used and discarded. But you, sweetheart, you showed me what real love looks like. It's choosing to be vulnerable. It's standing up for others even when you're scared. Like Claire did, Emma added. 5 years of working undercover, carrying that burden alone, all to protect other families from what happened to her brother. The mention of Claire brought a warm smile to Marcus's face. Their relationship had deepened in unexpected ways over the past months, built on a foundation of genuine trust and shared understanding. She had become a trusted friend to both him and Emma, proof that authentic connections could still form in the aftermath of betrayal. The foundation is making a difference, Marcus said, glancing at a text message from Sandra. 3 families came forward last week, victims of similar schemes. We're helping them rebuild, not just financially, but emotionally. Emma nodded, reaching for a journal on her desk, her therapy homework, chronicling her journey of healing. Dr. Mitchell says that trauma can be like a stone in a river. It doesn't disappear, but over time, the water shapes it into something different. Something that can even help guide others. As they sat together in the warm autumn light, Marcus reflected on their journey. The initial shock of betrayal had given way to something deeper, an understanding that while trust could be weaponized by those with cruel intentions, it could also be the foundation of genuine healing when placed in worthy hands. Later that evening, at a small gathering of survivors and their families, Marcus watched Emma leading a group discussion for teenagers who had experienced similar family traumas. Her voice was gentle but firm as she shared coping strategies and encouraged others to speak their truth. Sandra Chen approached him, her daughter Amy by her side. David would be proud, she said softly. Not just of what we've accomplished with the foundation, but of how we've all refused to let bitterness take root. We're writing a different story now, Amy added, her eyes on Emma. Not one of victims and villains, but of survivors and healers. As the sun set over the Exeter campus, casting long shadows across the autumn leaves, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace. Catherine's betrayal had shattered their world, but from those fragments, they had built something stronger, a community bound not by pretense or manipulation, but by genuine understanding and compassion. Emma caught his eye across the room and smiled, a real smile, reaching her eyes in a way that reminded him of her childhood innocence, before Catherine's manipulation had cast its shadow. In that moment, Marcus knew that while the price of trust had been steep, the rewards of authentic love were immeasurable. The healing wasn't complete, perhaps it never would be. But as Marcus looked around at this unlikely family they had built, survivors, supporters, friends who had become something more, he understood that sometimes the deepest wounds can lead to the most profound transformations. And in the end, that was a truth worth everything they had endured to discover.